I'd like to welcome you to your City Commission meeting tonight and would ask if you could please silence or turn off your cell phones. I'd like to also remind everyone that our meetings are available for viewing every day on Channel 2, also at 6 p.m. and midnight, and also on YouTube. And from here, we'll go ahead and say a Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a silent prayer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with the Mayor's Award and the Small Business Saturday Proclamation. Kitchens, you want to come on up? Great. Sir, all right, no problem. Well, folks, wanted to kind of present tonight here, really for Pat's outstanding service while we were in this interim position until we brought on Mr. Peterson here. He really did a heck of a job, and there's a lot of things he did that really were unnoticed by a lot of folks in our city, and he fielded questions all the time. He was super prompt, overly prompt, I would say, even in his responses. Anyway, we really appreciated it. And anyway, so Chief Kitchens wanted to present to you the Mayor's Award for Community Service for your selflessness and vision during the time as interim city manager and seeing the city of Leavenworth and its staff through the transition to a new city manager. Mr. Kitchens led the city through its 2025 budget process and cultivated many relationships and partnerships with our key community stakeholders and agencies. He oversaw the development of the city's Vision Zero Action Plan to end traffic fatalities and promoted a collective approach to cybersecurity efforts. Mr. Kitchens compassionately approached addressing the unhoused and those struggling with mental health issues. He did all this while skillfully maintaining staff morale by thoughtfully addressing concerns and facilitating open communication. It is with deepest appreciation that we thank you for helping make Leavenworth thrive. Thank you, sir. Thank
you. Mr. Mayor, Commission, appreciate you very much. I learned a lot, mostly that we have a lot of really, really great people that work here, and they do a lot of things, and I was half smart enough to just stay out of their way most of the time and let them do their job, which they did a great job and made me look great, so I appreciate very much. Thank you. I'm greatly excited to return to the police department. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Cool deal. All right, and Small Business Saturday. Do you have anybody? All right, come on up. You doing him? Is he? Whereas advocacy groups, public and private organizations across the county have endorsed the Small Business Saturday as a Shop Local campaign held on the Saturday following Thanksgiving to encourage reinvestment in small business across the country, and whereas small businesses employ over 55% of America's workers either owning or working for a small business, and whereas 87% of consumers in the United States agree that small businesses are critical to the overall economic health of the United States, and whereas according to the research firm Civic Economics, Small Business Saturday has a positive impact on the economy and also reports that 48% of purchases of local independent businesses are recirculated locally, and whereas National Main Street Center and Kansas Main Street are leaders in promoting Small Business Saturday throughout the country, and whereas annually Leavenworth Main Street hosts Shop Small Saturday on Small Business Saturday within the downtown, with many businesses consistently participating. On average, $95,000 is spent in the businesses, and overall merchants collectively average $200,000 in sales. And whereas the city of Leavenworth wishes to recognize the contributions that small businesses make to our community and make the local economy, now therefore I, Griff Martin, Mayor of the city of Leavenworth, Kansas, hereby proclaim November 30th, 2024, Small Business Saturday in the city of Leavenworth, and hereby urge all citizens to shop and support our local businesses. All right, thank you so much.
On behalf of the board and Leavenworth Main Street investors, I really want to take the opportunity to thank you, Mayor Griffith, and our commissioners for elevating small businesses in our downtown community and in our municipality as a whole. Shop Small Saturday is an opportunity for us to really hone in on spending our local dollars locally. We'll have a lot of different businesses participating. We have over 150 members in Leavenworth Main Street, and they are eager to welcome you into their stores. We will have a variety of different types of shopping promotions, and Leavenworth Main Street also provides a incentive for shoppers. We will be doing raffles offering Main Street bucks, so you'll be able to win dollars that translate directly to cash in our stores downtown. So come on out, bring your families, enjoy the day, and shop small, shop local.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to old business, consideration of the previous meeting minutes from October 22nd, 2024 regular meeting. And if we don't have any comments or questions, we just need a motion.
Mayor Martin, I move to accept the minutes of October 22, 2024 regular meeting.
All right.
Second.
Motion's been seconded. We'll begin voting with Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
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 All right, motion passed 5-0. Item 4, second consideration ordinance number 8253, amending Code of Ordinances, Chapter 44, Section 87, no parking anytime.
Mr. Mayor, Commission, there have been no changes or comments from the first reading, and it's ready to proceed if you're inclined to vote.
Okay. So with that one, we just need to do a roll call vote. We'll begin voting with Commissioner Bowder.
Bowder, aye.
Ingela, aye.
Martin, aye.
Pittman, aye.
Wilson, aye.
All right, 5-0 pass. Thank you. Item 5, no action item taken from October 22nd, 2024, Library Board appointment. So this is to consider the appointment of Mr. Robert Jason Redmond to the Library Board as introduced by Mayor Martin at the October 22nd, 2024 City Commission meeting.
I have a question. Do people need to be residents of Kansas to serve on the library board? Or any board, any of our boards?
Well, under state statute, all members appointed to the library board of a city shall be residents of the municipality.
So they just have to live here?
They have to be residents of the city of Leavenworth.
Okay.
So I guess any questions on this piece here before we move to a motion?
Well, you're making the motion, so.
Okay. I do. Mayor Griff Martin, move to appoint Mr. Robert Jason Redmond to the Library Board to serve for a term of 4 years.
Second.
Okay, motion's been seconded. We'll begin with Commissioner Bowder.
No.
Yes.
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 Okay, motion pass 4-1.
Three, yeah.
New business, public comment. Sarah?
Yes, we have two people to speak. Up first is going to be Mr. Raymond Hillebrand.
Okay. Sir,
Thank you for listening to me.
and sir, if you could just repeat your name and address.
Sorry,
And
Ray Hillbrand. I live on Cheyenne Street here in town.
Okay.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, I purchased a metal storage shed. It's a little cubicle, set it in my backyard, and I realized that put me with 3 buildings. So I understand, and I'd be happy to go on and applied for a variance. But the city zoning office come back and said my little metal shed is a shipping container. So I had to try to beg to differ with it and explain it's not a shipping container. It's assembled with bolts and nuts, and it's nowhere near seal tight, has no lifting points, has no forking points on it, has no tie-down points on it. It's a metal building that's 8 by 12, and I don't know that you'll find an 8 by 12 shipping container. So I've been going back and forth, and I've got emails in here, and I've got pictures telling me that it's a shipping container, and shipping containers are not allowed in any zoning area in Leavenworth, none. I said, okay, I tell you what, I've got a shop on Shawnee Street, it's a commercial building, I'll just put it down there. And the answer came back, nope, no shipping containers are allowed in Leavenworth. So, my problem is, it's not a shipping container to begin with. Through the emails with this person, I'll be happy to supply it, I asked, what are you basing it on? On lifting points, on tie downs, on, however, to move it, I mean, shipping container. I can't get a response, all I got back was, we've determined it's a shipping container, and you gotta get it out of town. I can't even take it to the commercial property. So, the wife and I took a drive today, and if this ordinance is being enforced, it's being enforced poorly because there's shipping containers on properties all over this town. I'm asking for the commission just to appoint somebody that may not be biased, because I think right now people are digging their heels in on this. I've got pictures, I've got copies of the email, I'm not gonna mention the person, but I can't appeal. But they told me, yeah, write a check for $350, and then I'm pretty sure they're gonna say, well, thanks for the money, but no anyway. And that kind of brought to me a little bit of point about that. I mean, I'm an ordinary citizen, and if the government is wanting to stop me from doing something, I understand it. But $350, that's a penalty for trying to have the right to do something, or appeal the right to do something. That's a penalty. I mean, we pay taxes in this town to begin with. So what are our taxes going to? I thought that's what the 8 hours a day per employee is supposed to pay.
Well, sir, I'm sorry. I appreciate you bringing this.
I'm fine, I'm just, I can understand it if there was thousands of hours of work or something involved, on making a change on something, but this should be an administrative thing that the citizens here in Leavenworth should be paying for anyway.
Could you send me that picture of the shipping container, please?
Oh,
Or
I'd be more than happy
what
to.
they're calling a shipping container?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's gonna be the city's picture, okay? All right, can I bring it up to you? Or just,
You can just leave it there and I'll get it, or,
Okay.
thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr.
I'm gonna leave a picture of the email, or I'm gonna leave you a copy of the email also, if you don't mind. And, I mean, here's a picture across the street from my shop. Those are 18-wheeler trailers.
We can't do
Okay.
that, yeah.
Thank you.
So, anyway, thank you. I'm gonna leave these pictures with you, because these are pictures of shipping containers in the city. And here's a copy of the email, and again, the last thing that it says right here is that it's staff determination that the container on your property is a shipping container, and as such, is not permitted to be used as an accessory building if you disagree. And right down below it, it tells me that no shipping containers in any part of the city. I know that's not right, so I'm just trying to be fair. If I can't take it, I'm stuck. If I move the building to my shop, I'm still illegal. The only other choice I got would be to have somebody pick it up and dump it on the side of the highway somewhere.
Sir, I do appreciate you bringing it to our attention. Mr. Peterson, could you make a note as a follow-up on that as well? And
Okay,
we will get back with you,
right
okay?
here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Yeah, I
Holly.
was over to his house today, and I looked at this thing, shipping container. I don't want any of my stuff shipped in.
All right,
We have one more, Mr. Alex Force.
okay. Ms. Force, if you could state your name and address, that'd be great.
My name is Alex I've been homeless here in Leavenworth, Kansas for the past 10 years. But I wouldn't consider myself homeless because I live at the Interfaith Community Homeless Shelter, or when it's nice outside, I live in the woods behind the community center by the river. I moved here from Portland, Oregon in 2014 when I got out of prison because my buddy told me that an Interfaith Homeless Shelter just opened was at least 500 feet from any schools and daycares and would give me a free place to sleep and 2 free meals a day. I've liked living here so much that over the last 10 years that I've been here, I have had all my other buddies come here too. Because everything is given to us, like food, shelter, and clothing, the only thing I have to worry about is getting enough money during the day to buy fentanyl, heroin, and meth. I don't have to worry about traveling anywhere because the local drug dealers deliver like DoorDash and meet us at the park right next to the shelter and sell to us openly and freely, rain or shine. When I'm not doing drugs at the park, I'm walking or biking all over Leavenworth, looking for stuff to steal from people's cars, porches, garages, and backyard. If that doesn't get me enough money, I'll stand on the side of the road and beg for money. Thankfully, this is not only accepted, but allowed by the city. You may ask me why me and my friends don't live in any of those surrounding towns, like Lansing, Baser, Bonner Springs, Platte City, Weston, or any of the other small family towns around here. Again, it's because we get everything handed to us here, so why move anywhere else or get a job? I would like to thank the city of Leavenworth for doing absolutely nothing over the last 10 years to stop me and my friends from doing whatever we want, even when local businesses, homeowners, and taxpayers lodge complaints. Your silence and activity shows your support. I didn't come here today to just thank the city. I came here with ideas and suggestions about new ordinances that could be enacted to better assist us in our lifestyle and make life for us here even better. An ordinance banning anyone from putting security cameras up outside of their homes and businesses. They might tell you that it's for safety and security, but it's only discriminatory against a home challenge like myself and prevents us from getting the money we need for drugs. I also recommend keeping all streetlights off at night. People's cars have headlights, right? This will also assist us in stealing items from around Leavenworth. It further prevents light pollution, and the money the city saves can be used to convert the old Council of Aging building into a drug use safe haven when the weather is bad, and we can't do it in the parks or outside of the library. We could also use the money to provide us with even more free stuff, including a used needle exchange program, Taco Bell gift cards, or anything else we may want. I have so many other great ideas, but I know I only have 3 minutes, so I'll wrap this up. The city is doing a fantastic job. Allow all these local businesses, homeowners, and taxpayer pools to speak today so that you can continue to do nothing about it tomorrow. Together, we can turn Leavenworth into the Portland of the Midwest. Dirty Mike for City Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Sarah, anyone else?
Nope.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to item 6, general items, consider updates to city fee schedule.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, tonight before you for consideration are updates to the city fee schedule regarding refuse and sewer fees specifically. As part of the approved and adopted 2025 budget, the monthly fee for collection and disposal of refuse and the sewer service charges are set to increase by 3%. So tonight, we're here before you to ask for approval of the updated fee schedule changes with an effective date of January 1, 2025.
Just as a refresher, Sarah, I think we talked about this last time. When was the last rate increase? Do
The
you
last
remember?
rate increase for sewer was last year. There was an increase that was in that fee schedule, and refuse has been several years. We have not increased the refuse.
It was the refuse, okay, yep,
Refuse has not
that's
been
right.
increased for a while.
Yep. Okay, any questions or comments from anyone? Okay, then no questions, I'm sorry. Commissioner Wilson, I'm sorry. Any questions or comments?
No, sir.
All right, then we just need a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept the, fee changes for 2025, effective January 1st, 2025.
I'll second that. Just a note, these are very small changes. I mean, they're within $1 on most of these, so it's not a great, I don't think a great expense here for the homeowner.
Okay, well, the motion's been seconded, so we'll begin voting with Commissioner Wilson.
Hey, I, and also I have to exit off this call, so I vote aye.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you all as well.
Aye.
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 Motion passed 5-0. Moving on to item 7, resolutions. Resolution B 2384, Kansas Region L Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, I'm before the Commission this evening asking for you to approve the Kansas Region L Hazardous Mitigation Plan. You might recall that in the latter part of spring or early summer, Chuck McGaha, the Leavenworth County Emergency Manager, was here and provided an overview of county emergency management.
Yep.
And contained in that conversations was discussion about approval of the plan. That document has been prepared and completed under the supervision of the Risk Analysis Branch of FEMA. Johnson County, Leavenworth County, and Wyandotte County prepared and submitted the plan for approval to that organization. It has been approved by them. In order, very simply put, in order for the city of Leavenworth to be eligible for FEMA reimbursement while recovering from a hazard, the city commission must adopt a resolution approving the plan. That was contained in your packet. On the policy report, there is a link to the report. I have a hard copy there. It's several hundred pages long. And so just so you know that each department director within the city of Leavenworth had the opportunity to review it and make sure that it was correct. And just very generally allows us a guideline to we all accept on how a particular event might unfold. If we have a flood or a tornado or a train derailment, something like that, we generally accept how we're going to handle that. And again, in order to be eligible for FEMA reimbursement, you would need to support that plan as well, which we're recommending. So again, I would ask you to approve the resolution that adopts the Kansas Region L Hazardous Mitigation Plan, and I'll do what I can to answer whatever questions you might have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Questions, comments?
None.
Nope.
Okay. I don't either. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So then we just need a motion on item 7.
I move approval of Resolution B 2384, the Kansas Region L Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Second.
All right, motion's been seconded. We'll begin voting with Commissioner Bowder.
Aye.
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 Motion passed 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 8, Resolution B 2385, authorizing serving of complimentary alcoholic liquor for Main Street Alive After 5 Winter Wine Walk.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, before you this evening is a resolution authorizing the serving of complimentary alcoholic liquor or cereal malt beverages to members of the general public during the Leavenworth Main Street Alive After 5 Winter Wine Walk event that is scheduled for December 6, 2024. Typically, the Alive After 5 events occur on the first Thursday of the month. However, city staff was contacted by Main Street about moving the date to a Friday. Because the date does not fit within the previously approved resolution, a new resolution was needed. So if the commission is so inclined, this resolution would allow them to do what they typically have done with their Alive After 5 events, just on a different day for this particular event in December. Main Street would strictly control the activity and still file a report or a document with the Kansas Alcohol Beverage Controls required by law. We're just seeking your approval to allow them to do that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
No.
Comments? Okay. All right, just need a motion on item 8.
I move approval of Resolution B 2385, authorizing the serving of complimentary alcoholic liquor for Main Street Live After 5 for the Winter Wine Walk.
Second.
All right, motion's been seconded. We'll begin voting with Mayor Pro Tem Pittman.
Aye.
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 Motion passed 4-0. Which brings us to item 9, Resolution B 2386, authorizing serving of complimentary alcoholic liquor for Main Street Alive After 5 events in 2025.
This is basically the same thing, just for their 2025 events that will still be planned for the first Thursdays of the month. We've been passing this resolution since about 2016.
Right.
So we're here
It works.
again.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. There's no other changes in, so.
No other
okay.
changes.
No questions, comments?
No.
Okay, just need a motion on that.
I move approval of Resolution B 2386, authorizing serving of complimentary alcoholic liquor for Main Street Alive After 5 events in 2025.
Second.
All right, motion been seconded. Begin voting with Commissioner Bowder.
Aye.
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 All right, pass 4-0. Thank you. Moving on to our staff report, homelessness discussion.
Mr. Mayor, Commission, we're before the governing body this evening. Over the course of the last several months, Mayor Martin directed staff to have some conversations about homelessness. Mayor Pro Tem Pittman also asked for some questions. So I put together a staff report this evening. I invited some guests that have some expert knowledge. So I'm pleased to welcome Miranda Agnew, the director of the Interfaith Community of Hope, and Christina Ashe-Guidry, who is a Kansas Homeless Advocacy Network. So I think over the course of the last year and a half to 2 years, we've seen an uptick in the issue of homelessness in our community. In particular, I think we've seen more visibility at locations in our community, such as the park, and we've had a little bit more disruption than normal than in the downtown central business district. So I wanted to come and visit with you tonight, talk about homelessness, provide you some information, and then have a discussion about that. The city of Leavenworth, like many communities across the country, has always had a homeless population. I've been in the profession of law enforcement for 34 years, and we've always had a homeless population. It has grown, of course, in that time, but this is not a new problem, and communities all across the United States are dealing with the issue of homelessness. Our community has seen an increase in the homeless population the last couple of years, and so we came to have a discussion with you about that. Very simply put, when I'm talking about the issue of homelessness, I always start with this to make sure that we have a proper conversation. It is not illegal to be homeless, okay? A more pointed statement is you can't make it illegal to be homeless. There's not a law that you can pass that says simply based on someone's status of homelessness that we can arrest them or take action against them. It has to be more than that. Homelessness cannot be solved by arrest. It is going to require a broad-based community effort with resources from every avenue to try and make some progress over it. But I'll talk about our general approach in the law enforcement profession, which is what we're sort of the first point when people call and say, hey, chief, or hey, police department, can you go do something about that? I'm going to use the example of an encampment. Over the course of the last few years, we've had a pretty sizable encampment under the bridge over at Broadway and Cherokee Street. We've had a pretty good size encampment on the north side in the wooded area by the community center. And so typically speaking, when people start to complain about that, it is generally associated with a couple of things. It's noise, it's trash, it's other elements. The one that got everyone's attention north of the community center was a small grass fire that happened because the camp was operating generators, and so that caused a fire. So typically speaking, how we approach that is we make contact with generally the people that are at the encampment, and we start talking about time to go find alternative locations. We typically come back a couple of times over a week-long period saying that we're going to close the camp and it's time to find an alternate location. We do at some point impose a deadline and say that's it, it's time to go. A couple of things about that. We're not authorized to just go up and grab everything that's up there and throw it all away. We have to give them the opportunity to collect their personal belongings and that sort of thing, and so we've done that. That's generally how we've handled it, and it seems to work, although the alternative, everybody knows what happens, is the camp sort of forms somewhere else, and we kind of continue to move around. But that's our general approach to how we handle that sort of thing. And then I'll turn my attention a little bit to the sort of individual where we have issues relative to folks, okay? I'll talk about the city of Leavenworth in particular. There are different categories of homelessness that people can talk to you about. Like a person might be categorized as homeless because they're sleeping on someone's couch every few nights and not have their own home. But I'm talking about the people that the police deal with pretty regularly. We have about a dozen to 15 people in our community. I bet you that those of us that have lived here for quite some time know most of who it is that I'm talking about without using names. Okay, the difficulties are that these people, okay, have mental health issues associated with them. They have medical issues, they have financial issues, and they have substance abuse issues, all of which, okay, make it an incredibly complicated issue to sort through and deal with, given, in some instances, our limited power, essentially arrest or to the hospital, and so that's what the difficulties are, okay? Some of the ordinances that we have on the books that we use pretty frequently in dealing with someone, for example, that's in a business downtown causing a disruption, okay? Criminal trespassing, if the business owner doesn't want that person to come back, they get a trespassing warning. If they come back, then we take them into custody for trespassing. Disorderly conduct, that's just generally disruptive behavior, yelling and shouting, littering. And then most recently, we enacted an ordinance the last couple of years called illegal camping, in which we, talk about on public property at the parks or places where, and so we typically have used that. So we have tools in the tool bag now that generally are sufficient to handle low-level minor issues that we deal with pretty frequently. We do have that, okay? One of the areas that we had that was a significant gap in our ability to deal with those dozen to 15 people were mental health tools, okay? One of the areas I feel like we've made the most progress in and the most significant changes over the course of the last couple of years are these things that I'm going to talk about now, which we have in the tool bag that did not exist as much as 18 months ago. First of all, the mental health co-responder. I came and we talked about how to fund that with the opioid substance abuse money that we've been getting. And so we employed a person, she works at the police department, Andrea Kessler. She's an outstanding person, very knowledgeable about how to handle and deal with this particular group of folks. One of the benefits of that is it takes the burden of having to do the follow-up, liaison, coordination with mental health services and medical services. That she's able to do that, and the officers can get back to the street. There's something, a person called the Justice Involved Behavioral Health Liaison. That's a person that's assigned to the jail, employed by the Sheriff's Department. So even if we take someone into custody for a misdemeanor, minor violation, and put them in jail, there may be a mental health issue that is evaluated once they get to the jail. That's a new tool that we have not had in the last couple of years. The Guidance Center has a mobile crisis team. These are for people that are really having trouble. Where we are working here is getting the law enforcement response out of it, and the professional mental health person. A person calls 911 and they're suicidal, or they're having mental health issues and they're homeless and they have substance abuse. Maybe a better alternative going forward is not having the police there, but having a mobile crisis team. So they go and they deal with that. That is relatively new, and we're learning about that, but that's been successful in other parts of the country, and so very thrilled with that. There's something called the ACT team, the assertive care treatment. So we have half a dozen to a dozen of these people that are really, really difficult, homeless, chronic issues. They have, for lack of a better word, probably 8 to 10 professionals as part of this ACT team that look after them. And so essentially what's happening now is a person that might be on your mind is being checked on 2 to 3 times a week. Whereas before, the only time we'd have contact with them or interaction with them is if there was a call about them being disruptive. Now there are a little bit more of an offensive approach. They're out in the community where they are, talking to them, trying to give them services and get them back on track. And then finally, we have mental health diversion in municipal court. We have a person that we've arrested 6 to 8 to 10 times in a year for low-level misdemeanor offenses. We know that the problem is not criminal in nature, it's generally mental health. And so when they go to court, we're able to get them diverted. The judge orders them to get treatment, and that seems to be a little bit more successful. So these are all the things that we have employed over the course of the last 18 months to 2 years to try and make progress in the law enforcement and sort of criminal justice element of the homeless population. And I don't have progress notes or say how's it going yet. It's relatively new, and we're having we're still sorting what that looks like. What's progress mean? Okay, of the 10 people or 12 people that we deal with, is that number down to 8, 7, that kind of thing? And so we're still sorting through that. So that's the police department's perspective on what we're sort of currently doing now, and then how we're sort of approaching the issue. I asked Mr. Waters to do some work. There was a recent Supreme Court case that was very enlightening to communities who are dealing with this all across the country, and David is going to talk about that now.
Yeah, I'll speak very briefly on this, but Chief did a good job of speaking about how there were various tools that can be used to address homelessness from an enforcement perspective, and that's, I want you to know, that's kind of the lane I'm staying in here for this. And of course, one of those was adding the anti-camping ordinance. That has been a model that has been used in a lot of other cities nationwide. I believe Chief modeled his on others that have been done nationwide. At that time in 2021, there were a line of cases, several Court of Appeals cases, holding that these types of ordinances were unconstitutional as being cruel and unusual punishment if they did not provide for an exception, if there was not, if there were no beds or homeless shelter beds available for which these people might qualify. And so based on, if there's essentially nowhere else for them to go, for them to criminalize that, so the Court of Appeals held that that was cruel and unusual punishment. As a result of those hearings, of those decisions, we advised the city at the time that the best chance of your own ordinance surviving a constitutional challenge would be to include a similar exception. Since that time, one city challenged the finding of unconstitutionality and the matter went to the United States Supreme Court. And in the decision from this spring, the United States Supreme Court did determine that it was not cruel and unusual punishment to not have that type of exception in it, meaning you do not have to have that "are beds available" exception. What the Supreme Court generally said was that you have to distinguish the crime and the punishment. The crime is camping, and to say that the crime in and of itself, being accused of the crime, is a cruel and unusual punishment misses the punishment side of things. So for example, they left open that if you have the crime of illegal camping, but for example, you being a little bit facetious here, you put a penalty of 20 years in jail on it, that could be cruel and unusual punishment. If there's a $25,000 fine, that could be, because that's the punishment side, but just having the crime itself and where the penalties are generally in line with other misdemeanors, that was okay. That does not mean that the city of Leavenworth needs to amend its camping policy, its ordinance, if you don't want to. So currently, you do have an exception that it's a defense to a charge for illegal camping if there are not beds available. The Supreme Court did not say that you can't have that. It just said you are not required to under law. So that's the state of the law right now. The Supreme Court probably signaled that cities generally will have broader authorities to manage homelessness, again, through these types of actions, whether they be anti-camping ordinances or others. And at least the Supreme Court is probably going to generally find in favor of those and support those, provided that the punishments are not out of whack with similar punishments for similar levels of crimes. So that's the update for you. We don't have before you ourselves any proposed changes to the ordinance, but as part of your discussion, I at least do want you to know where the latest Supreme Court decisions on this have landed.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Appreciate that.
Can I ask, camping? So when they're sitting on 4th Street with the tent by the benches over there, is that camping? Or is camping living someplace from day after day?
Well, camping is defined.
Thank you.
In
So I guess
the
I should ask.
It means is the use of land to, let me make sure I'm going to pull up the latest version of it here. The use of land to conduct one or more specified activities. And those include sleeping or preparing to sleep, such as laying down bedding, storing personal belongings such as clothing, sleeping bags, bedrolls, etc., making fires for the purpose of warmth, cooking, etc., erecting a tent, a lean-to, etc. So doing any of those types of things, when based upon doing those things, it reasonably appears, considering all the circumstances, that the participants in doing those are using the area as a living accommodation. So that's generally what the statute defines it as.
Okay.
One of the differentiations that sometimes create issues is whether it's on public property or private property. There's a distinction about that.
Right.
And so that there's a little bit higher standard on private property, but it still can meet those requirements. Where you're talking about is certainly on public property, unless we got onto the homeowner's property, and then it's a little more complicated. But that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So that would technically be camping.
Right.
Okay.
So I'll turn it over to Miranda Agnew now, who's going to talk about sort of homelessness from the shelter's perspective.
Mayor Martin, Commissioners, thanks for letting me be here. I'm gonna give Jermaine a hard time, because when I was here in January, he also was not here, so I'm gonna start taking offense to this, but I appreciate a seat at the table to talk briefly. I'm gonna be talking about a little bit of the same concepts that both individuals on the side, so I will try to make mine fairly quick. But in general, as we talk about this, it's complicated. So when individuals are calling with solutions, which I love that, we too would have we would solve all of this if it were a quick solution. We have individuals at the table that really care about this. It's just super complicated, very complex, and honestly, it's very unique for each individual that we're working with. Our main goal at the Community of Hope is to remove barriers from homelessness and equipping people to prevent their homelessness. That is where we land at the Community of Hope, of trying to make homelessness as rare and brief and non-reoccurring as we can with what we can control. Our programs, just to recap, I know I've been here before, but we have a night shelter, we have a day center, we serve 3 meals a day, we have laundry services, we have shower services for those that can access our services or do access our services. We get this question a lot. We are low barrier, meaning we do not do substance screenings, we do no background checks. The individuals that we are working with, unhoused individuals, do have barriers. And so we do believe at the Community of Hope, these are the individuals that we need to be serving to try and make their stint in homelessness as brief as possible. We do have a partnership with the Guidance Center, and it is such a beautiful partnership. Chief Kitchen talks a lot about, Ashley Phillips is here from the Guidance Center. I told her I was going to point her out. They are a huge partner in this. We know mental health plays a huge factor in this. They came to the table a couple of years ago. They are in our building every day. So any member that he spoke about, the ACT team, the co-responders, all of these individuals are in our building on a regular basis, everyone from leadership down to ACT team and caseworkers, because we know so much of this is a mental health issue, and trying to address it as quickly as possible is key, and we have been able to make a lot of progress in that. And then our goal, because again, I'm doing a little bit of rumor control, our goal at the Community of Hope is to get them out in 90 days. We know that the quicker and the sooner we can get individuals rehoused, or they can rehouse themselves, is usually the case, the better it is for everybody, and I'll talk about the chronic problem that we deal with. But the average is 288 days across the state for somebody to get housed. Barriers of vacancy rates and all the challenges, but our goal is still 90 days from the time they land in homelessness. I'm not going to go over this a lot because maybe I'll get to see you again in January, but sometimes we get asked, where are we on serving at the Community of Hope? We have already served mid-year. We had already served 208 individuals at the Community of Hope. We served 241 in all of last year. So the increase that he's talking about, we're seeing it across the state, we're seeing it across the nation. That is not, abnormal for what the trends we're seeing. The rest of it, bed numbers and meals, I just wanted to explain that as we look at the 12% is about what is across the state, and if that is not correct, please correct me when you speak. But we are seeing that locally. It is not unique to Leavenworth. We are seeing that just like everyone else is seeing. A little bit more rumor control. This is something that we started following last year. The Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition is a group that we work with, I feel like on a daily basis, but they really are starting to track this because this is what a lot of communities care about. So we are in the Northeast region of the state's COC. You do not need to understand that. Here's what you do need to understand. We are tracking who is from Leavenworth and who is not. In the Northeast region, we're experiencing about 70%. These are your neighbors. These are your friends' children. These are your friends' parents that we are dealing with, and I'll talk a little bit about the other percentage. The being from Leavenworth County, the Community of Hope does require them to be from Leavenworth County. That is something that was an agreement when I was not here, unfortunately, during that time, but when we talked about building the shelter at 311 Kiowa, we spoke about it being Leavenworth County. And the situation was we were just so small. We have limited resources, very limited resources. Prior to last year, we had 2 full-time staff members. running the Community of Hope, lots of volunteers that support that and part-time. But we just don't have enough resources to open it outside Leavenworth County. This is hard because we get hit on both sides of this. We get the individuals that say they're homeless, how can you determine they're from Leavenworth County, you should serve everyone, and then we get the opposite side of this. While I have not met our individual that spoke earlier, I can combat, we get this a lot that says police departments from all over are dropping off people to Leavenworth. I get that at least every month, that we just see police departments from all over dropping people off. That is not true. At least that's not true in the 3 years I have been here. But there are complications to people being from Leavenworth County. So what happens when they land at St. John's Hospital and need discharged? They come to the Community of Hope often. Or what happens if they serve a brief time in Leavenworth County Jail and then have to do probation here? Or what happens if they're in Lansing Correctional? Or what happens if they get discharged from Grossman? Like, these are all things that we talk about on a daily basis, because we have to figure out what is best for the individual, for our community. If we can partner, and we often do. We have a huge advantage of having such great partners in Leavenworth. But if somebody is displaced here, and we get this question a lot, if somebody gets displaced here because they get dropped off, we do try to help the individuals get back home. So if somebody is from Wichita and they got dumped here because somebody promised they were coming to visit a family member and then just never took them home, and that is the only way for them to get back home, we do that. I don't like to advertise that because we're not buying Greyhound tickets for everybody to travel across Kansas, but there are definitely ways we can prove that or see that, or we've even worked with the police department a few times, because if a $20 Greyhound ticket or a $200 Greyhound ticket can get somebody back home, it's worth it, and so we do address it that way.
Can I ask a question real quick? Sorry. So the people that come from Grossman or that come from the jail, they're not residents, but because they're living here, they are residents.
Well, and often they get a year probation here.
Okay.
So
they become residents.
it becomes complicated. And we don't define it. It drives everybody crazy because we don't define it. Because the example I give is and this is just the way it goes. If we have a 30-year-old white male, someone would say, like, why is he here? This makes no sense. But if I have an 80-year-old female in a wheelchair, people think differently, right? Mm-hmm. But we apply those policies to everyone, no matter mm-hmm. their race, their ethnicity,
But if they're living here, they're residents, just like serving on the library board. If they're living here, they're residents.
Right.
And so they can.
Yeah.
We have to serve them at this point because
we try to take each of those. We reach out to all those individuals. We have great relationships with parole officers and probation officers and community corrections, and we just have to look at each of those. Those are outside of our bounds of being from Leavenworth County, but does it make sense to bring them in at least and give them the 90 days to try to get them to, and we had one land here last week. He has a job. He's working at the guidance center. He is a contributing member to our society. And why would we not try to support that with him moving forward with his goals?
Thank you.
Here's what I want to be very specific on. This is where we get a little bit confused. People will say, you've heard it, we built the shelter and then we have homeless people. That is not the case. It's also not the case that the homeless shelter can solve homelessness. So people will also say, we built the homeless shelter to solve homelessness and it's not happening. And spoiler alert, homeless shelters do not solve homelessness. Homeless shelters do not solve homelessness. Housing does. And so I just wanted to bring it up that even if you take an individual from the streets and put them in the shelter, they're still homeless. Those two statuses do not change. That's the location. But the homeless shelter is not going to solve their homelessness. Housing is going to solve their homelessness. So we often get the build the big shelter, build the mega shelter. And even though, as the director of the Community of Hope, I would say we would welcome all the resources, that's not going to solve homelessness if that is your goal. And then I've already talked about the 12% that is increasing. The homeless shelter is a crisis response service. That is what a shelter is. The other thing is just to mention that when we're dealing with individuals, again, a lot of the times when we're talking with Chief Kitchens and his team, the things that people are seeing is the hoarding and the drinking. And it's just to mention that when we're thinking about individuals who are unhoused, these issues are happening with people who are housed also. They just don't have a place to hide it. And so when we think about all these homeless people that have all of these substance issues, there are substance issues and mental health issues across our nation. We just see it with the individuals who are unhoused. And then local government belongs in this work. We value the opinion, we value the relationship. We would love to grow that because you do belong. Local government for sure belongs in this work. And then the exciting thing is it is solvable. There are a vast array of ways to solve it. The challenges here I'm not going to talk a lot about, but you know it. We've talked about it before, but I will hit on the chronic homelessness that Chief Kitchens talked about. This is a little bit unique to our area. We do have a higher percentage, not number, of individuals when we're talking about the unhoused individuals that we are dealing with. We have a higher number of chronic individuals, and Chief Kitchens is right. Those are the individuals that some of you can name. And chronic homelessness is very expensive. And that is where people start getting frustrated. That's typically what people are seeing. And we have ways to address that. Christina's going to talk some about that. But also it is harder, and I don't want to discount that. One thing I will mention is the Community of Hope is the only warming center. So when we talk about getting individuals off the streets, it will come, the weather is getting cooler. The only place to get inside is the library or the Community of Hope, and that is a detriment to our community. That is a really hard thing for everybody to grasp when the weather gets super cold, and it's something that will come up. So be thinking about that as winter approaches. I know I had like 10 minutes and I talk way too much, so I apologize, Chief Kitchens, but one of the things that I do want to show is the key findings. So we're working again really closely with the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition. This is just to make you aware that as they worked on what's called the gaps analysis to show where there are gaps across our state, the Northeast region, which is Region 5, the very top region, is the Northeast region, which we fall into, and most of the data in the Northeast region is from Leavenworth County. We hit the top 3 categories across the COC in 6 of those categories. Meaning that when we're talking about chronic populations, we hit the top 3 highest. Some of that is because we're doing the work. It's not because it's growing, it's just because we're actually tracking it now. With the individuals who are disabled, we deal with a lot of retirees living on, or even before they retire, living on that very small disability check. The veteran population, that does not surprise us, but a lot of the unhoused we deal with are veterans. The survivor population, single adults, and then families. What you don't see at the bottom, which is called the housing inventory count, this is the count that shows what do we have available. So what are we combating the identified populations with? So emergency shelters, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and then permanent supportive housing. And we don't hit any of the top 3 in any of those categories, with the exception of permanent supportive housing, and that is because the VA does a great job getting Section 8 vouchers for veterans. So that is veterans that can come here, not just from Leavenworth, and there are 130 of those, so we shoot to the top of that, and we're working on getting that a little bit more explained in future reports. Opportunities is just, we are a part of a larger network. We meet every Thursday as a collective. So Catholic Charities, Guidance Center, Community of Hope, the VA, we have partners. That group has turned into about a group of 30. Every Thursday, we case manage every single unhoused individual that we're aware of by name. So we are talking about Miranda Agnew and what is going on with her and where is she, how much law enforcement involvement has she had, has she been going to services at the Guidance Center? If not, we do intakes in our building. And then we have responses to these, which Christine is going to talk about, but just more engagement from local government is a huge opportunity. We would love local government to have a seat at the table, whether that's the form of a task force or attending those meetings or just continually being engaged in these conversations. And with that, I will turn it over. I can also click if you would like me to. Okay.
Thank you.
Miranda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miranda.
My name is Christina Ashley Goodry. I am the Director of Policy and Planning at United Community Services, and I'm here on behalf of the Kansas Housing Advocacy Network. Some of you are familiar faces. You were at the Lunch and Learn we did in September with the Interfaith Community of Hope at the Heritage Center. It was lovely. So we, please, Chief Kitchens and Miranda asked me to come and talk about what the Kansas Housing Advocacy Network does. And what we do is collect data, we do best practice analysis, and then we develop policy, evidence-based policy recommendations to address housing insecurity and end homelessness in Kansas. So that's what we do, and we're a statewide network of organizations that are actually doing this work in the state. And so we came out in September, and I'm here to talk about some specific policy recommendations and some specific data about Leavenworth City. So I would ask you, as we kind of get started, to set the stage. We're really fortunate in Kansas because just a generation or so ago, we could reasonably assume that if we worked hard, we could find housing and afford it that fed our needs, right? But that's not true anymore. So now, finding affordable housing that meets your needs in your community is more like a game of musical chairs. So what that means is that people are getting left out. And what that means for communities, for local governments, is that the housing shortage is actually holding back our economic growth. So when you think about your own housing journey, think about all the different places that you've lived and why you've moved. And we move because we need housing that fits our needs better, right? We need to be closer to work, or we need a bigger house or a smaller home. And we know that we're kind of pushed to move. It's a lot of work to move. We have to be pretty uncomfortable. And so I would ask you to think about in your housing market here in Leavenworth County, in Leavenworth City, how comfortable are you, right? Because we're all in the same housing continuum, the same housing market together. So you, in the house that you're living in, how well does it fit your needs? Would you like to upsize or downsize? What about your parents or your children? So when you think about your own network, you know the stories of people who've had to move back home or double up with friends. Then think about your community members. So who is it who makes your community great? It's your core workers, right? So it's your law enforcement response, it's your child care workers, it's your physical therapists. So it's the folks who make your community happen. Can they afford to live in your community today? Can they find the housing that they need in your community? So we know the answer to that is no, because there are gaps in that housing market or that housing continuum. And we know that from our own personal experience. We know that because your police department can't stay fully staffed, or because you're struggling to find staff for public works, or because you don't have childcare workers, or you have a teacher shortage. But we also know that because of the statewide housing needs assessment. This was the first statewide housing needs assessment in many years, and I think that the findings will resonate for you here. We have a growing older population in Kansas overall, many of whom are living in their forever homes and really need to downsize because it's too much space. And then we have these young families who can't upsize because the older population is still in those homes. But there's nowhere for the older population to go because we haven't in the past encouraged having things like townhomes or duplexes or garden homes. I know you guys are looking at this right now, having 15 new duplexes in Leavenworth City, which is awesome. But that is kind of the gap that is glaringly obvious. For Northeast Kansas alone, we know that we need between 1,300 and 1,600 new homes built each year. And that is moving forward. So there's a really significant housing shortage. At the same time, we're facing these really dramatically increased housing costs. And so developers will tell you, as in fact I'm sure they have with the new 15-unit duplex coming online here in Leavenworth City, that they literally cannot afford to build new housing that is affordable, that they can't make the money work. And so that's where we have to look at state and federal incentives. At the same time, we have a lot of old housing stock in Kansas. In Leavenworth City, you guys over half of your housing was built before 1979, and 40% before 1969. So that's great from the perspective that you have existing housing that's affordable. It's not so great when your utility bills are $500 or $600 a month because your home needs to be weatherized, or because you can't use the second floor of your home because you can't get around anymore, right? So we need to address that concern. In 2024, 3 years after this report was released, we have additional challenges. Interest rates are about double what they were still. In 2021, we're looking at inflation. Increased rental costs in the state of Kansas are higher last year than they were in New York, or California, or Colorado, or New Jersey. We saw an 11.3% rental increase on average. And that's something that cannot be sustained by our residents. And you'll see that in the data that I have on the next slide. So at the heart of all of this is that we have an inadequate housing supply. We have a housing shortage. The National Low Income Housing Coalition estimates it at 100,000 units for lower income residents. And I want to be really clear that lower income residents, if you're looking at 60% of your area median income or lower, is households who are making $55,000 a year or less. That's a good salary if we're talking about a teacher or law enforcement or public works. So if we're looking at Leavenworth County and Leavenworth City, the data was actually quite different, so I broke it out. In the county, the data is pretty similar to the state. The city is wildly different. You guys are a huge outlier. You have half of your city is renters and half of them are homeowners. You have as you know, I'm not telling you something you don't know, you have a hugely transient population here, which is a challenge and an opportunity. The problem is that with half of your residents as renters, we know that half of them are spending too much on rent every month. And then about 1 in 3 or 31% of your homeowners are spending too much on their housing every month. And that doesn't include, by the way, the need for home repairs. So that's just with under their mortgage. So what does it mean to be spending too much on housing? So we have a marker in the United States that the federal government has set that's called the housing cost burden. And when you are paying more than 30% of your gross income on housing, then you're considered housing cost burden. And that's a red flag, because when you're spending that much money every month on just housing alone, then you are extremely likely to be putting regular necessary expenses on your credit card and to have credit card debt. You are extremely unlikely to be saving anything month to month. So the Kansas Speaks survey just came out like a week and a half ago, and 42% of Kansans said that they did not have even expenses for 1 month saved. So not a chance. If their hours got cut or they had an illness, next month they would be without a home. So that's the red flag. That's the concern that we have, is that's half of your renters and 1 in 3 of your homeowners. So what does that mean? So when you have gaps in your housing supply, when you have a housing shortage, when people can't move in that housing continuum or housing market, then someone is always going to be unhoused. You are going to have homelessness because supply does not equal demand. And so what happens is your vulnerable residents, that's folks who have mental health or substance use conditions, but it's also folks who are on fixed income, who are living on Social Security. It's folks who were paying too much for rent and then their daughter got sick, who are going to end up experiencing homelessness. So Miranda is exactly right. We saw from 2022 to 2023, we saw a 17% increase in homelessness in the state, and from 2023 to 2024, a 6% increase, and so it comes out at 12% year over year for the past 2 years, which is disheartening, right? That's a challenge, and that is a result of the inflation that we're seeing and the housing shortage kind of combined. But I want to be super clear that when you look at Kansas compared to the rest of the United States, this is an incredibly solvable problem. We are not Colorado. We are not California. We in Kansas see 0.4% of the homelessness in the United States. This year's numbers for the one-night count was about 2,800 individuals experiencing homelessness. That's compared to a population of 2.9 million, right? So this is a situation that can be resolved. So, and as Miranda touched on, we have a coordinated response to homelessness. It's called Continuums of Care. You guys are a part of Region 5. The whole entire state is covered by these continuums of care. So each continuum of care is assigned a geographic area. Each one has a planning body, and it pulls together this broad coalition of all the different partners who work in this space so that we can coordinate our activities to have the best possible outcome. And we work together to access federal funding. So what does that look like? So each COC has a coordinated process. As Miranda talked about, they meet every Thursday. They know every individual experiencing homelessness in this city by name. And they have done an assessment of needs to figure out what this household's strengths are and what their needs are. And then their goal is to connect them to the services that they need, to the resources they need to become and remain stable. The problem is that, unsurprisingly, COCs don't have all the resources that they need. Sometimes there's not that connection to be made. So here, resources that maintain housing, you guys have a gap there. You could, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, housing maintenance, repair, rental, utility assistance programs are a need that is really pretty strong here that is unmet. You guys have the shelter and you have a domestic violence shelter, which is fantastic. You don't have transitional housing. When you're dealing with folks who need more than 90 days, who need 6 months or 9 months or a year to pay down past due debts or evictions and get their credit card business in order and then save to put down that first and last month's deposit, you need more than 90 days. You need a transitional housing program. And then when you're talking about these really complex needs, you guys have a number of really great new initiatives working together that will bring down this issue, but you also have to have housing for the folks who are getting this mental health guidance center response to be living in. And the problem that you have now is that all the permanent supportive housing is with the Veterans Association, and so your non-veterans don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
So what can be done? So how do we move forward from here? So it takes a three-part approach because it's a three-part problem. So you have to have the housing stock, just the supply. Then you have to act upstream to keep Kansans housed. So this is making sure that your folks who are already vulnerable, who are already paying too much for housing, can stay in their homes because it's much cheaper to keep them in their homes than it is to see them become homeless and spend 228 days on average in homelessness. And then finally, provide housing with services. So that would be like an extension of Community of Hope to stabilize folks. So we have some specific recommendations. First of all, a housing and homelessness task force led by local government is a best practice to start this process. Counties across the state, cities across the state have been doing this. You guys don't have at this time a housing and homelessness task force, but you are in the middle of or just finished your sequential intercept mapping. That's a phenomenal program. That is figuring out how to divert folks out of law enforcement by connecting them when they're in crisis or to other resources to stabilize them and not waste your law enforcement resources. A housing and homelessness task force is really going to build on the work of sequential intercept mapping. It's an extension kind of that work. So you'll be able to use those connections to staff a housing and homelessness task force. With a housing and homelessness task force, you can begin to identify the public and private partnerships to address the gaps in your housing continuum. Because local government can't do it alone, state government can't do it alone, you have to have nonprofits, you have to have faith-based organizations at the table working with local government to solve this problem. So an example that I have here, Johnson County Mental Health, and Tim DeWeese here is a contact there. He took part in the sequential interceptive mapping in the Housing and Homelessness Task Force in Johnson County, and would be happy to be a resource for anyone in this community. But Johnson County Mental Health has street outreach programs. They have mental health providers who also have access to housing supports through the Housing Authority, so that your mental health provider can get someone into housing immediately. They have a youth crisis center, kind of like your guidance center, and then they have co-responders similar to your co-responder program that all kind of work together to get folks off the streets. A really great other program, Department of Corrections in Johnson County was also regularly releasing individuals into homelessness, and they decided that that was not working out for the community, and so they have now set aside a unit where folks who would otherwise be released into homelessness can spend up to 90 days. It's a separate unit, so they're not interacting with the currently incarcerated population, and they're under supervision. But they can spend 90 days there. On average, I think they spend like 42 or 48 while they get up first and last month's rent, and they get their feet under them, and then they go out into the community, and instead of committing crimes and returning to Department of Corrections because they left Department of Corrections homeless, they've left with supports and a plan and are able to get reintegrated. So that's the homelessness piece. Recommendations. How do you take action on housing? Leavenworth City, as far as I can tell, doesn't have a community housing assessment. There was a toolkit, you can do this with Department of Commerce, it is free. After completing a community housing assessment, you'll know what housing inventory you have, what condition it's in, and what gaps you have. And the contact there is Sarah Bloom. Once that's completed, the great thing is you can go back and talk to the Housing Interagency Advisory Committee, and they will look at your community housing assessment, and they will tell you what different federal and state resources you are eligible for, or that you could apply for to address the housing issues in your community. Tim Parks is the contact there. In the interim, a recommendation that I would have for Leavenworth City, because you have such an enormous transient population that actually ends up being in competition for homes with your long-term residents. You guys have folks who are here for 6 months or a year or 2 years, or who are deployed here, and then they buy homes, and then those homes become vacant after they've left. And so you have this vacant housing stock that's not usable, that's not being rented. That's a big problem.
Yep.
Something that I would encourage you to look at is expanding property rights for existing lots by allowing accessory dwelling units or in-law units to be used as rental property. So that's a benefit to your existing homeowner, because your housing cost burdened homeowner can now rent an in-law suite or a garage suite to somebody transient who is now not competing with them to actually buy or rent other housing. They can retain that money locally, so you're keeping your rent local, and you have added substantially to your housing stock without having to bring in a developer, right? So it becomes a win-win for many different parts of the community. So finally, how do we act upstream? How do you keep your cost-burdened residents housed? This is a big issue. Like you have seen, half of your renters are housing cost-burdened, 31% of your homeowners. So something to look at here, you have a housing authority, and your housing authority has a housing navigator, which is great. Your housing authority administers housing choice vouchers. They used to be called Section 8 vouchers. These are really powerful. It's free federal housing money. We know from working across the state that virtually every housing authority has a many years long wait list to get a housing voucher. However, that doesn't mean that you have full utilization of the vouchers you have already, right? So for example, in Dodge City, they have like a 3 or 4 year waiting list, but only 33% of their housing choice vouchers are in utilization. And that's because you move up to the top of the list, and you have 60 days to find someone to accept your housing choice voucher, and you can't find anyone. And so then you turn the voucher back in and it's never used. So how do we get those in full utilization? How do we fully benefit the community? The city of Pittsburgh, for example, is doing an amazing job with this and has reached essentially functional zero with homelessness by using their housing choice vouchers for individuals experiencing homelessness. The way that we can do this effectively is by having housing navigators, but also having landlord incentive and mitigation programs. You can do this with existing HUD dollars or with philanthropic dollars. In Douglas, Wyandotte, and Johnson County, their landlord incentive program looks like you get a month bonus if you sign on as a new landlord to accept someone who has a housing choice voucher. That is usually combined with a landlord mitigation fund, so a one-time set aside of, say, $50,000 that landlords are told if you have a housing choice voucher client who leaves and there's damage to your property that exceeds their property deposit, then you can claim here on this mitigation fund. Douglas, Wyandotte, and Johnson all have those mitigation funds. When I talked to Douglas County like a month ago, they've had this for 18 months or 2 years. They've had one claim ever on the landlord mitigation funds. Johnson County's never had any. So it's a lot of peace of mind for landlords, and they tell us that that is a reason that they're willing to take housing choice vouchers, but it's not a great expense. When this is combined with an ordinance that says that landlords cannot refuse to accept you just because you're using a housing choice voucher as part of your income, then the utilization rate in Douglas County is 99.7%. It's in the 90s, I feel like it's 95 or 96% in Johnson County and 92% in Wyandotte. So making sure you're using your housing choice vouchers because they're a powerful tool. So then the last couple of recommendations, working with your existing housing stock and weatherizing homes. We know for folks who are on fixed income, weatherization is a huge issue because utility bills skyrocket as your home gets older. If you need new windows or new siding. And so you guys have a CDBG minor home repair program and a first-time home buyer program, which are great. What I would encourage you to do is look at public-private partnerships for home repair. Brush Up MAC in McPherson County is a pretty effective program. Habitat for Humanity will often work in a public-private partnership way to provide supports. And then consider setting aside property tax relief for specifically fixed and low-income households. We're seeing now a lot of folks who retired in 2016 or 2017, and their property tax in parts of the state have doubled since they retired, which is just something that they didn't budget for when they retired with a paid-off house. Something to keep in mind as we think about whether to use law enforcement and how to use law enforcement is, as Miranda mentioned, we have to pay to address homelessness no matter what. If you take just a respond approach where you have someone who or people who are chronically homeless who are living outside and you are sending law enforcement to deal with them, or you are sending emergency responders, or you are they're having to go to the hospital and of course they can't pay their hospital bill, that costs on average just over $35,000 a year for that one person for the course of the year. If you're providing housing with supports, that includes case management and mental health, behavioral health, medical supports, that costs closer to $13,000 a year for the same person. So we have to be thoughtful to invest those taxpayer dollars wisely. When we take it in arrest, it makes homelessness worse, and it uses our taxpayer dollars in law enforcement capacity in a way that we can never get back. So I will just reiterate that we're all on this same housing market. To have economic growth, we have to have housing that meets the community needs. If we use cost-effective solutions, homelessness is temporary and solvable. Next steps here, could be having a housing and homelessness task force that builds on the work of the sequential intercept mapping they've already done, and having a community housing assessment so that you can identify public and private partnerships to address the underlying issues. And here's my contact information as well as Johnson County Mental Health and other resources.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, just in closing very briefly, I think our goal tonight was to sort of try and help us define the problem here locally, the sort of approach that we're using, the tools that we have, and a lot of information about sort of the underlying issues about why we have, the issues of homelessness. And so we'll be glad to continue that discussion while you have the experts here to help answer questions that you have, or we can, take that information, think about it, and go from there.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all coming tonight. Definitely would like to take it from here and keep conversations going forward. I have a lot of comments tonight, but I'd like to turn it over to the rest of the team up here. They'd like to weigh in also right now with everything you guys have laid out.
No, I would like to see us start that task force, something that other local city governments are doing. No reason why we can do that.
I think that's a
As
good
much as
place
the
to
As much
start.
as the complaints we get.
I could also send you some of those local cities that are doing that, just so you can look at their work. If that
That'd be
would
great.
help.
One rumor you didn't address that I would love for you to, are there buses dropping people off in Leavenworth every day?
So rumors are always like 1% true, right? So there is a Greyhound that comes to Leavenworth, period. Is it dropping hordes of homeless people off? No. That is a service that's on the south side of town, so I don't actively monitor who gets on and off every day. But for every bit of service that we worry about, it provides a service as well.
Right, so they also brings them out of town.
Right.
If they need to go.
Right, if they need to go. I don't know, no one I have spoken with has said, oh, I came here on the Greyhound and want to live in Leavenworth. There are people who say I want to live in Leavenworth, but we don't hear that 20 people a day are being dropped off by a bus, nor do I see that happening.
And address that a little bit, Commissioner. I don't think there's bus loads of homeless people, but sure, occasionally a law enforcement agency, for example, maybe the Sheriff's Department or the Highway Patrol, runs across somebody on K7 south on the way to Kansas City, and for whatever reason, they've decided to bring them back here. That's fair, that happens, but it is not something unusual. When we encounter someone that's relatively new to the city, it takes us all of about a week to determine that this person is not from here, and we know that they're new. And so that's happened once in the last few months, where we had a person that suddenly came from somewhere, and we're experiencing contact with them frequently. But then people leave, and so that 12 to 15 number, it has remained relatively stable for folks that we deal with at the police department frequently that cause trouble.
And is it fair to say some of those people, especially with the mental health illness, want to remain homeless? I mean, these programs are great, but I'm not sure if they would work.
I think they get a choice, and my friends at the Guidance Center have helped me understand that individuals, adults, get to make choices. And so there are services that it would never come out of my mouth to say someone wants to be homeless. Homelessness is hard.
Sure.
But I think that there are barriers to, if you've never paid a lease, it's terrifying. Like if you don't know where to pay, or you don't have a bank account, like the things that we do naturally every day are actually really complicated. And if you don't have a car, and you don't have a bank account, and you don't have, there are so many barriers that people are just like, it's actually easier just to not. That's where we come in at the Community of Hope. That's where all of the caseworkers, the supports that we're talking about. There's caseworkers at the Guidance Center that now can, or not now, but they can push in and help navigate those challenges to keep people housed. Because like she said, not only is it cheaper, it's way easier to keep someone housed and navigate their problems in their home than it is to navigate them once they get back, back to homelessness.
And you're teaching those classes, or you're?
Yeah, we did in the winter time. Catholic Charities has some financial classes. The Guidance Center has some classes. They're actually coming to our building every other week now to do classes. So
our building's small, we have to get a little outside the box, but yeah, there are programs more and more, because the things that we take for granted, to say somebody doesn't know how to pay a bill is a real thing. Especially if they're 18 years old or 19 years old, aging out of the foster care system, and they show up on our doorstep with special needs. Again, these are the populations we don't think of. Or if they're 80 years old and they
Can't work.
they're trying to live on their retirement. And this is happening. We have 4 of these individuals that we have been working hard, so hard, incredibly hard, trying to get them connected to nursing homes. And you think that is an easy process, and it is not. We have worked almost 4 or 5 months on an individual that is very actively talked about on Facebook, that is in a wheelchair, that should not be living on the street. None of them should be. But it's extremely hard when you see an elder female living on the street in a wheelchair. That's because systems are failing, and that's what we've got to get down to the bottom of.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm just mulling this over in my mind. We also have DePaul, which Sister Amy is back here too, and they're building numerous duplexes and transitional housing.
Yes, they're a huge resource to our community.
And that kind of gives some
growing.
stability to people that, and they're providing support services as well. Sister Amy's here
Absolutely.
too.
And Chris and Sister Amy are engaged in all of our meetings on not just the Thursday meetings, but our monthly meetings. And Chris is in our building almost every day for a lunch, just talking to individuals. So yes, thank you for mentioning that.
And we've had like the Human Services Council and that you know, looks at all of the different agencies in the community, but this would be more targeted, like I'm thinking of the Child Abuse Prevention Council, where you target and find solutions for specific people in that. But it depends on what you want this committee to do, actually. If you're alleviating homelessness on a general basis, then that's one thing. You're dealing with individual problems, that's another thing. And if you're looking at providing more housing, then I think landlords should also be involved in that. So there's a lot of discussion that could go on.
Absolutely, and we're looking at landlord engagement in our community. Some of the other communities in our state have started that process, and it's one of those things where there's no sense in recreating the wheel. So they are working through, you know, landlords coming to the table and what is important to landlords before we would kick that off. We've got a few steps before we get to that point. I would definitely not be looking for the commission or we would not be looking for you to be case managing. I think it is bringing
can't do that.
the commission to the table
Not qualified.
to problem solve. We all are trying to solve the same problem. That's the good news. There are plenty of areas where people are very torn on what the end goal is. We're all at the end goal of solving homelessness. How we get there looks different. And so just having the commission, having local government, the county would be amazing. There, to my knowledge, is no general budget items spent at the county or the city. I'm not saying it all has to be money. We have smart people on the commission, would just love a seat at the table for all of us to come together and truly solve this as a community.
I'd like to also see small businesses, because sometimes the people go into their stores and they do damage, or they steal things go in there. I want to make sure that they have a voice in that.
Absolutely.
We're looking out for them too on the business side of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and the people that work around us that we see every day in our restaurants, in our stores, in our banks, they don't make enough money to pay our high rents here. And that is an issue. These are people who are all around us. So we need to keep them from being homeless
100%.
and still working to support their families. That's all I have.
Thanks, Dave.
Nothing. I want to go over every one of these slides. That was a lot of information in a very short period of time. But not just you.
We totally stuck to our 15
I'm going to
minutes.
debate short with you, Commissioner, but short. We'll forward all that to you.
Good.
Thank you.
For every bit of short, Chief Kitchens is, I make up for it, so.
No, I definitely appreciate it. Like I said, I got just some comments, and again, I really appreciate you guys putting this stuff together. When I express frustrations, first of all, my frustrations, Miranda, are not with you or yourself. It's just in general. Like Chief Kitchen said, we met earlier this year because, notified again another business owner that, feels for the safety of his, employees, and it's a common thing. And Chief Kitchens, having to deal with this like he has for a number of years, was kind enough to kind of walk me through some of the reality. And I think it is important. I think, Holly, you kind of touched on this some, and you did too, Nancy. We're really talking about two issues here. One is homelessness. The other is mental health. And because of our I know I'm preaching to the choir, but our system today makes it that every case we deal with is basically a ticking time bomb. Somebody gets killed, then we can do something. Somebody gets injured, then we can do something. But until then, our hands are tied. There isn't anything. I absolutely agree. Homelessness is not illegal. It becomes our issue when our residents feel the threats. When our economies start taking hits, our business owners, because of whatever situation, they have a harder time hiring employees to go into those businesses. So while I absolutely believe it would be very prudent to put together a task force, I'm glad you mentioned that, Holly, and I think we definitely need to do that to address the homelessness issue more thoroughly, get more stakeholders to the table, and maybe it's a larger task force than normal. But mental health is still an issue, and I think Chief, you had mentioned that it's a lot of times it's right. It's the 12 or so individuals that are kind of the right.
I would say of the 12 to 15 people that we have, almost all of them have some diagnosed serious mental health issue that they are not capable of doing the same things that we are doing in a normal environment. They're just not capable.
Right.
2 of probably the 14 want to be homeless, and they're a pain and they're difficult, but by and large, if we could attack those 12 or 15 people in some way and get that number to 6, that would be remarkable progress in my experience. And so what I am optimistic about today that I was not 2 years ago are those half a dozen things I talked about that we're doing today that we were not doing and have not done for a long time. So I am very optimistic about those issues and those tools now providing us some progress, but it is not going to be overnight.
Right.
And won't make those problems go away tomorrow.
And for those of you that maybe might be listening even online, what Chief's talking about is, we have the tools now to, whereas if we had an arrest before, somebody could be turned loose again, a few days later or something like that. Or just couldn't hold them very long at all. And now we have more of a procedure to put them through our system, what system there is in Kansas. And at the end of the day, maybe it can keep them off the street a little bit longer, but the threat can still be there from a mental health standpoint. And the reason I bring this up too, because it's very frustrating, and I think we all have friends, family, and neighbors that live here, that work here also, and it's really ticked me off. Like, what are we going to do? We just have to let somebody get killed before we address it? Dealing with everything else that can come with homelessness, yes, there's different, but that's the one that really gets me. At what point do we say, well, enough's enough? How do we address this? It's not here tonight. It's not going to be next year. But I think, what we found out, and again, Chief was, we went through a little bit of a process. We got the state involved a little bit to get a little bit more awareness, understood maybe what some other counties are having to deal with, other police departments. Find out what's going on, a lot more often, how we're contending with many other police departments for resources all the time in the state. And I want to see the state get involved a little bit more because you could do everything right, Miranda, and it's like you said, it's not going to solve it. You also said, maybe kind of shifting a little bit, you're very resource tapped right now. A couple of years ago, I know you mentioned that the Community of Hope, there were no guidelines in place, and you wanted to put guidelines in place. Can I just ask anything just off the top of your head, you know, some things that...
Because we're struggling through this right now. Here's my hope for what you had just said. One thing I will mention is the hardest part is we probably are talking about one individual, right? In the 300 we serve a year. That's hard. That's hard to know, and that situation has improved a little bit thanks to our friends at the Guidance Center. It's not just the homeless that are doing these things, right? Going into businesses, it's individuals who are housed too. So we kind of get stuck in that. I will say the hopeful thing is, and this is where we are struggling. I will be very honest at the Community of Hope. The hopeful thing is if we have all of this in place moving forward, our chronic population across the state, we look at about 20% of chronic individuals. So these are the individuals that some people went to school with. These are usually the phone calls at class reunion time that I get that says, what can I do for this person? He was the valedictorian, he was the star athlete, he went to Leavenworth High, he went to Lansing High, how can we help? These are our neighbors. These are people who went to school here. And if we can address this quickly, again, homelessness should be rare and brief so that people are not sucked into this. There are plenty of times that people enter homelessness and have never done drugs. But you go try to live outside when it's negative 20 degrees and you find friends because you have nobody and you get sucked into it. I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, but if you leave someone on the streets for 6 months, I'm gonna probably say they're gonna use drugs. Like that is just, it just is the nature of trying to survive, and I'm overgeneralizing that.
That's all right.
I'm not saying everybody does that, but it is hard to live under the bridge, even though it frustrates a lot of us, and we have frustrations too. I struggle, I have to call Chief Kitchens and problem solve, you know, stuff being all over 4th Street, and I talked to Holly. The hopeful thing is, if we are doing the right things moving forward, that this problem, we could solve homelessness in Leavenworth County.
Yes, homelessness would be majorly positively impacted potentially.
100%. I believe we can get to functional zero. Whole different concept to talk about. People are never going to stop getting evicted in our community. Evictions are going to happen for various reasons. We will not solve, when we say solve homelessness, it doesn't mean we're never gonna see a homeless person again, right? Evictions are going to happen, but that is where the Community of Hope is supposed to be, to catch that person and get them back, help them get back housed.
So to that point, I'm glad you said all that too. I think what I feel, and again, these are just my thoughts, and we can talk about this more in another meeting. But I really think, you know, one of the things we're missing right now, and I'm huge on metrics, measuring everything. We have a lot of groups, you know, Miranda, that we work with, that everybody talks about everything they do. Here's some stats, and that's it. I would love to marry a great report out from you guys, group that with the police department. I would really like to understand what the positive impact is. Not the positive impact you've had on everybody's life, but, and I'm not saying you're saying that, but just what are we really seeing? There's a lot of numbers, we see numbers all the time. We'll talk about, I think, a lot more of these things to measure coming up, but we just don't do that enough. And I think we're doing our residents a disservice. We need to track, are we making progress or not? You showed a couple numbers from the last couple of years, you know, 12% increase, a couple years ago, 6% increase, right? You know, last year, it's like, oh, we're on a downward trend. Well, probably not, right? So I just want to make sure we're measuring everything the right way, you know, appropriately, and maybe we figure out, maybe it's with the task force, maybe us collectively, what that actually looks like, but it is something, I just want to make sure we're drawing a distinction between there's the generalized homelessness and mental health, because it is, I think, the mental health homelessness piece that it's more of a concern, and it's not just, like you said, Chief, there was an individual mentally not stable, homeless, that almost died in the cold last year. Well, that's not acceptable either. I mean, we shouldn't accept that so much, you know, as a society.
That's what we have to keep asking. What are the individual issues going on, and what can we impact?
Right. What can we impact? Yes, absolutely.
I had a meeting with my coworker Belinda in the morning to dive into an hour meeting of that exact thing that you talked about.
Yep.
What is our data showing? Are we doing the right things? And if not, we have to shift. If we're not doing the right things, that's why this one came to the table, and we said, collectively, there isn't a lot of data in Leavenworth. I was at, you know, another meeting today where we said, data's hard here, and we are continuing to build on that.
Sure, sure.
Absolutely will continue to.
So I think I definitely, I think we need to look at a couple of those pieces in the task force piece, because again, look, if you're not bothering me, if you're choosing to be homeless, that's one thing. If you can't help it, that's one thing. When my family's at risk, it becomes a lot bigger of an issue to me, and I think to everybody, right? So I just feel like that's where we're at. It was eye-opening to me. After Chief Kitchens just going through everything, I'm like, wow. In the state of Kansas, at least in the U.S. anyway, we're danged if we do, darned damned if we don't. And it has happened. People have gotten hurt here. And like you said, Chief, seen an uptick, right? Ramp up in issues too. So it's like eventually something is going to be conflicting. Homelessness is going down, mental health is going down, or it's increasing. Everything I've heard, there's more of a rise in mental health. Anyway, so just definitely have thoughts about it. Definitely would like to
Please, I never
look
take
more.
it personal. You can
Oh yeah. No, I needed to say that because I'm like,
no,
everybody knows.
We're
I
in the hard
get
work,
all
and it
hyped
takes
up.
all of us. So when you have those concerns, the best thing is to share them.
So
that we know what you're hearing, and that's why a task force would be great, to just really get all on the same page and know what we're tackling.
Well, Miranda, I appreciate, because I do call you a lot.
Yeah.
I call Chief a lot, and you're honest, you're open, and you've told me these things, and you're right. Not all homelessness, not all mentally health people are. Some of them are house.
I could give you data
Yeah.
on mental health across the US, and it
Right.
does not match
I
homeless
had one
numbers,
driving
so.
across my house the other day, so I know.
Yeah. Yes,
but
absolutely.
they are. I think they're two separate issues, but yet they still cross.
They do, they cross. And I'll applaud Chief Kitchens, even though we continue to take longer, and it's just driving him crazy, but, we are lucky. I
We
just
are.
had the conversation, we've talked about it, I talked about it across the state last week. We are lucky to have Chief Kitchens. I do not care what anybody says regarding homelessness or housing or literally anything. We are lucky that we have a chief of police that is engaged in this work, that is a phone call away, that is quick to respond when there are concerns with a legitimate answer on what we're dealing with.
Yep.
I applaud him. I take it for granted because I haven't worked with another chief of police. But when I'm hearing conversations across the state, the unique thing we have in the city of Leavenworth is partners at the table that are willing to have conversations and say, I don't like this. What are we doing? Because that's what we need. We don't need people to say we just want it to go away, because spoiler alert, it's not going away. We've got to address this.
Right.
We have to address it with all the different pieces, and I do applaud Chief Kitchens gets phone calls from me, probably about as often as I get them from you, probably. So it does take us all, and we just appreciate.
Well, it doesn't surprise me about Chief. He is an award winner now,
Yeah.
So
Very
anyway.
good job.
But it's nice that you come here and give us these answers, because as commissioners, we get the calls when they're, they're on 4th Street or when they're in a business, we get the calls.
And
so we
that's
need
okay
answers.
for us to get those calls. It's okay
Right.
for someone to pick up the phone and say, I don't know what to do. There's times where I pick up the phone and I either tell chief or a co-responder, like, I don't know what to do, but we do have answers now. I don't always have to call the police. We have these tools from the guidance center, which are huge.
Thank you
Yep.
so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So, Mr. Peterson, if we could tag that maybe as a next agenda item or study session, whatever we need to, on a meeting coming up on outlining a task force. Folks that are incentivized to fix some of the issue. All right. Thank you, everybody, for weighing in. Consent agenda. Take it away, Ed.
I make a motion that we accept the claims for October 18th, 2024 through November 7th, 2024 in the amount of $2,054,239.71. Net amount for payroll number 21 effective 18 October in the amount of $417,797.54. Police and fire pension in the amount of $7,491.38. And payroll number 22 effective November 1st, 2024 in the amount of $399,376.72. No police or fire pension.
Second.
All right, motion's been seconded. We'll begin voting with Commissioner Pittman.
Aye.
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 All right, motion passed 4-0. From there, we'll go ahead and go around the table. Maybe Chief Kitchens, you got anything you want to add?
I'm fine.
Okay, all right. Mr. Peterson, welcome aboard. Any comments?
Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. All right, cool. More to come.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I had a little fender bender on 4th Street today, and it was not my fault. But I want to thank the police and the fire and the EMS and everybody that showed up. It was great service, and I appreciate the rapid response, so thank you. Good job.
Are you all right?
I am fine.
Okay,
I am
good.
fine. My car's not, but I am.
Okay, well, I'll go.
I guess.
Welcome,
Oh,
Mr.
yeah, welcome,
Peterson.
sorry, yes, I'm so excited you're here.
He's getting around, he's not saying much yet, but he's getting around and meeting with people, so it's really good to have you here. That's all I have.
Yes, I ditto all of that. Welcome, glad that you are here. You know, finally a city manager who's focused on just being the city manager. No offense, chief.
He's pretty
And
focused.
it was a pleasure yesterday to participate in the Veterans Day Parade. And I hope that all the veterans went out there and took advantage of the beautiful weather, saw the Veterans Day Parade, and made a few stops here and there to get people to greet you and say thank you very much. That's it for me.
Cool. Actually, before I make my closing comments, there's just something I was thinking about. I thought about this on and off. Wanted to maybe get everybody's thoughts on, I know we had a couple of gentlemen up here tonight. 2 to 3 minutes seems a little bit tough to get kind of your case in sometimes. I don't know what we thought about maybe changing that to like a 3 to 5 minute public comment, time for our citizens.
That's what I used to
I
be. That's what it
honestly-
used to be.
I honestly think that you can get your comments, you can get your point across in 3 minutes. I really do, for most people.
It's like doing an elevator speech.
Yeah, not
Let
all
them
of the
line up
residents are ready to
front
do an
and then
elevator
back it
speech.
up.
Yeah.
You know, tell us what you want to tell us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think 2 to 3 minutes is fine.
Any comments?
Hi.
I could have said more.
Either go ahead or not.
Just something for you all to consider. Many cities provide a little bit of extra time if somebody's speaking on behalf of a group. Because overall that saves time because you don't have 10 people representing the group.
Yeah,
Speaking the same thing.
we asked for that too. We asked for one representative of the group to
Yeah.
speak. And
No, I appreciate that. I just want to get everybody's thoughts. I appreciate y'all weighing in. No, definitely, Mr. Peterson, welcome aboard. It's great to have you on board. I can already tell you're hyped up and energized to be working for the city, so appreciate that.
I
Thanks
promise
for.
I'll talk more in future meetings.
Oh, you're good. No, you're good. And thanks for coming out to the Veterans Parade yesterday too. That was good. So appreciate everybody coming out tonight, weighing in, comments, and I know we're getting ready for Thanksgiving coming up, and we just got through our election, which is good. So we'll see you all at the next meeting. And I just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.